Kia tātou nei whare. Just before I do start, I also just acknowledge that we are in the eve of Cyclone Gabriel, and that my prayers and thoughts go out to all those families that have been affected across the whole community. And as I share this prayer this morning, but you also acknowledge those that have departed and are no longer with us today. Nā reira. A tūtau mai runga, tūtau mai raro, tūtau mai roto, tūtau mai waho. Kia tau ai te mauri tū ki te katoa, tūturu whiti whakamaua kia tīna, tīna. Haumi e, hui e, tā e. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you, Councillor Hickey. No apologies or leave of absence have been received. I call for any leave of absence. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Your Worship. Firstly, my sincere apologies. I thought I had noted I put these requests in last year. So next week, I will attend the council meetings on the Tuesday online, but taking the rest of the week leave. So I don't have the dates in front of me, but I'll be able to confirm with staff. Returning the following Tuesday, so Tuesday to Tuesday, please. And then requesting leave of absence during the middle of the year, 10 June, 23 July, please. Thank you.
10 June to 23rd of July.
Thank you.
6 weeks.
Yes, it may be less than that, but I thought if I asked for that component, and then I can move within that time. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Kevin? Councillor Watkins.
I'd like to apply for leave of absence, Your Worship, as advised at the end of last year,
Yes.
from the 6th of May till the 4th of June.
Purpose of your leave?
I will be in China representing Council at 2 conferences and speaking engagements.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Councillor Henry Hickey?
Your Worship, I'd like to apply for leave as I'll be attending Te Matatini as a performer the week of the 23rd to the 28th. However, I do note that there may be an opportunity for me to go online at the start of the week, and I'd like to seek that opportunity to go online for one of those meetings, but seek a request. I note that there aren't any scheduled meetings for the end of that week, but I will be away at Te Matatini.
Thank you, Councillor Hickey. Month of February.
23rd to the 28th. Sorry.
And could we arrange to have any online opportunities for Councillor Hickey? Do I have a mover and a seconder for that leave? Councillor Sholem, Councillor Dixon. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you. That is carried. Confirmation of minutes. Minutes of the council meeting held on the 12th of December. Councillor Watkins moved. Councillor Fowler second. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you. That is carried. Now we move on to item 5, funding for Hawke's Bay Tourism. And I'll invite the Chief Executive to speak to this paper.
Morena, Your Worship, and Morena councillors, through you. I'll take the paper as read, but I think just to set some context and some key points to frame your consideration. Obviously, tourism is a big part of New Zealand's economy, and it's true that it's a big part of Hawke's Bay's economy. Currently worth of around $700 million to the region and supports around 5,100 jobs. Tourism fundamentally works from a national perspective first, role of Tourism New Zealand to bring tourists to New Zealand. Secondly, at a regional level, and Hawke's Bay Tourism is one of 29 regional tourism organisations in New Zealand. I think the catchphrase is we catch them, you skin them, in terms of then the experience at a at a community district level. In Hawke's Bay since 2011, Tourism Hawke's Bay has been funded by the Regional Council, who has collected a regional rate from all of the households of Hawke's Bay, from Wairoa to Central Hawke's Bay. For the last 5 or 6 years, that level of funding has been around $1.52 million a year. Hawke's Bay Regional Council, through the development of their long-term plan in 2024, signalled the end of funding. A lot of feedback from councils, the industry, and subsequently decided that that Regional Council would continue to fund Tourism Hawke's Bay for one more year. And the commitment was made that we would work together collaboratively as councils and with the industry and with Tourism Hawke's Bay. We asked Tourism Hawke's Bay to work with their members to look to double the revenue that they earn in membership fees. I'll point out of the 29 RTOs in New Zealand, who are all funded by ratepayers, there are only 4 or 5 of them that actually earn revenue from members, and Tourism Hawke's Bay is one of those. We asked Tourism Hawke's Bay to also work through what would a minimum viable product look like if it was not affordable to maintain the funding at $1.5 million a year. Tourism Hawke's Bay have done that work. They've come back and said, well, look, a minimum viable product is $1 million a year from councils, in addition to the agreements that they've achieved with their members to double their membership fees. The conversations with the council was, okay, are we all then going to look to each play a role in funding and maintaining a minimum viable product for the next 2 financial years ahead of this either being reconsidered through the next long-term plans, or if government actually changes any of the funding levers. There's talks about international visitor levies, bed taxes. That is not a current likelihood in the term of this government. So it's very much a how do you maintain, if you want to continue to have a regional tourism organisation, a minimum viable product for the next 2 years till there's either a reconsideration through the next long-term plan or something changes in terms of the new funding levers that don't exist now. We've had a pretty clear direction now from the Regional Council that they won't be making any funding available for tourism going forward, and that is also the position of Wairua. So it currently leaves the $1 million proposition for a minimum viable ongoing regional tourism organisation for Hawke's Bay with Hastings, Napier and Central Hawke's Bay. Napier and Hastings both at $462,500 and Central Hawke's Bay at $75,000. That is the fundamental consideration for you today. The reason that we're needing to do this in this time frame is rightly the Regional Tourism Organisation is owned by the Hawke's Bay Tourism Industry Association. It's then obviously has a funding arrangement, but the directors have directors' obligations, and in the absence of any certainty of funding, they have directors' obligations and need to make a call as to whether they are financially viable. So the last comments I will make is clearly we are proposing, if you do make the decision to make that contribution, this is not this can't be rates plus for our community. We know we already have a rating impost, particularly off Cyclone Gabrielle. This will have to be funded from savings. We've made a set of recommendations in relation to some specific funding that currently gets paid to Regional Council, and I'm recommending that we no longer fund $100,000 a year to coastal hazards, that we don't continue funding for a joint cycle coordinator. I had recommended that we stop funding to Hawke's Bay Biodiversity. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to remove that recommendation because we are in year 1 of a 3-year funding commitment to Hawke's Bay Biodiversity, but that all of this will need to be found from savings. This will have to come out of operations, which is either a combination of staff, some other activities or service levels changing, but this will all have to come from savings. And should you make the decision to fund Tourism Hawke's Bay, we will have to come back to you before the 30th of June and identify what are those savings that will be made in order to make the funding contribution to Hawke's Bay tourism. So that's the kind of summary of the paper, Your Worship, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. And I just want to clarify one point, Chief Executive. I think that Central Hawke's Bay are increasing there. That's 75. Thank you.
Sorry, and just for clarity, Central Hawke's Bay are making their decisions at a council meeting today. We're considering it today, and Napier City Council are considering it next week. And obviously, all of this has to move together. It's all dependent on each of the councils making a decision.
Thank you. I will take questions first. Just one comment that Mayor Kirsten Wise, Mayor Alex Walker and myself had met with tourism throughout the Christmas break in December and January, three times with the chief executives to try and understand how we could carry on with the service that our RTO, the Regional Tourism Organisation, offers, and give some sort of certainty and a way forward about how we could manage to look after the organisation as it works for our region as a whole. So while I am aware, because I've been here a little while, that in 2010 we had a model where everybody looked after themselves. Each council set aside money for tourism. And so that model in 2011 brought the RTO to Hawke's Bay and a funding model. And this is some of the history. And that revenue was collected by the Regional Council under an economic development rate. And that rate used the money for tourism from our regional ratepayers to pay for the RTO and for economic development. As we have heard from the Regional Council, that they no longer intend to collect that $2 million rate, and therefore this is why we find ourselves in the position that we are today. And so that your consideration on this paper is to identify, is this the best, what we should be doing as a region, but just to say that the mayors across Central, Napier and Hastings have worked on this to try and find a way to keep our RTO operational, and $1 million is a minimum that it needs to promote. And if you see the cost of promotion, things like Kia Ora magazine and all of those things that they use and they buy, $1 million doesn't get you a lot. So I'm just putting that out there. This is a minimum product offering. So I'll take questions and then we'll go into debate, starting with Councillor Sholem.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Chief, for clarity around biodiversity Hawke's Bay as well. Looking at 4.7 in the report, I note that it states that the proposed deliverables are not yet confirmed. So my question is just around the timing of that. I do understand that there's time pressures on this and wanting to understand how that will be firmed up and when that will be firmed up. And then I have a question to follow.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship, Councillor Shom. Yes, there will be a lot of work that happens should the councils decide to fund tourism Hawke's Bay. Clearly the constitution's going to need to change because it kind of reflects that the regional council is the funder. All of the things about governance, how appointments to board, all of the things we know, setting letters of expectation. So all of that would be the subsequent work that will need to happen relatively quickly should the three councils decide to fund, and so that all that work will be ahead of us in the coming months.
Thank you. And a follow-up question, Your Worship. I also note in 4.8 there is reference to the fact that there are some costs that have been previously covered by Hawke's Bay Tourism that may need to be picked up by HDC. Could you expand on that just a little bit so I have a better understanding?
Through Your Worship. So yeah, really, that comes at a choice for council. So if there are things that Hawke's Bay Tourism have previously done that council would like to see continued, but Hawke's Bay Tourism do not have the funding or the capacity to deliver on that, then that will be a choice for councils to decide whether they step in and cover that or not. It's not a given, but it will be a choice.
Thank you. Your Worship, I know you're asking for questions at the moment. Can I just indicate to you, though, that I do have an amendment I'd like to move to the recommendations that I have actually forwarded on to staff in advance for efficiency. So when the time is right, if I could please move that amendment, that would be great.
I'll just take questions at the moment. Thank you for your direction. Councillor Fowler?
Yep, thank you, through your worship, to the Chief Executive. Is there any other areas, the other day there was a Regional Action Climate Committee mentioned, whether that could possibly be looked at as a saving or anything else that you can think of as well, please?
Through you, your worship. Yes, so we'll need to do some more work on savings, but clearly in addition to the things that I recommended, we also jointly fund a staff member at the Regional Council for forestry / compliance. And thinking about that, we were like, no, that actually speaks to our overlapping responsibilities in the compliance space. We think we get value for money out of that role, and it actually speaks to what our role is. We do fund the Joint Action Climate Committee. That is circa $50,000 a year funding. We also fund road safety coordinators at the Regional Council. So whilst I've highlighted some things that I've recommended and would like decisions on, the reality is when we come back for what are the sets of choices on the saving areas that we need to make, those are the sorts of things that I'm foreshadowing with council will be the sorts of things that are on the table, because it is all going to be about finding that money within the existing budgets.
Thank you. Councillor Dixon?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. The point I really want to make is this is...
Questions at the moment?
okay.
Thank you.
No, okay, I'll ask the question then. So the question is, did the Regional Council consult with the ratepayer, because it's ratepayers' money that they're using as a collection agency?
Would like to answer that.
Through you,
Yes,
Your Worship.
annual
Yes, they
plan.
did. Through the long-term plan, they proposed no longer collecting the regional rate. Through significant feedback they had from the community, from the industry, from the councils, they made a change in the long-term plan for funding for 1 year that gave the opportunity for all of us, including Regional Council, to work through the things that I've outlined. They've subsequently indicated heading into their annual plan that they will not be willing to consider any funding for tourism Hawke's Bay going forward. But they did consult the community through the 2024 long-term plan.
Just a follow-up question, if I may, Your Worship. What was their reasoning behind not collecting this funding?
I think speaking to the chair who represents the elected members, their position is that their recovery from Cyclone Gabrielle is their focus, and their flood protection is their focus, and that they have to consider all of their other core business, and this is one of their core business that they have considered they won't fund. So that's
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey?
Yes, thank you. They've provided what was their profit and loss for the previous year, and then their go-forward budget. I'm just interested in, there's nobody actually here from Hawke's Bay Tourism, but the budget has been slashed. You know, there's, I think, the 2.7 million down to 1.2 million. Yes, I do have a question. The question is around effectiveness of that budget. So I'm concerned that it's actually a shoestring budget, and actually can they operate as effectively as what we expect them to with the amount of money that we will be contributing?
Through you, Your Worship. Yes, Councillor Harvey, I think the position that Tourism Hawke's Bay have been very clear on, and it's set out on the paper around what they will be able to do for $1 million and what they will have to stop doing given their previous levels of funding. They're clear that this maintains a minimum viable product around the core role of being but some significant things won't be happening. All of the trade and industry sort of work, and so it's been a matter of cutting cloth to what is the absolute minimum that holds until there is either new funding arrangements through a a subsequent LTP or new government funding levers. And the board's been very clear, because when Hawke's Bay Regional Council indicated that that they, there was no appetite for them to invest 300,000, because that was the proposition, that, Hastings, Napier, Regional Council would all put in 300 and Central Hawke's Bay would put in their money. They've said if it was $675,000, they're clear that $1 million is a viable minimum product. Anything below that, the decision that the board would make on advice is there would be no point continuing to keep the doors open, because it would all be suboptimal, and that the decision of the directors would be to close Tourism Hawke's Bay down and start that process heading into the 30th of June when their funding ends.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr?
Thank you, Your Worship. Question to Chief Executive Nigel. In the paper, it refers to chief executives coming together, letter of expectations, placement on council representatives on boards. I'm really interested in how we as governors are able to have input into what we expect Tourism Hawke's Bay to do for Hastings, and how that will be reported back to us, so we can make sure that we're providing really good governance to the independent board and to the organisation.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. That is the work that needs to be done. As I say, that the constitution is going to need to be, reviewed, and all of the things that the funders have the right to do, as we do with other entities, is the appointment process to boards, the letter of expectations that sets out as a funder, and so all of that work will need to be done, but it will have to come back through, have to involve the councillors, and it will have to be approved by the council.
Thank you, through your worship. I've got 3 questions, if I may.
Certainly.
Chief Executive, please, have you had a response from the Regional Council re our letter to remove $100,000 and what the impact that may be on the coastal hazard strategy and consultation going forward? My second question is...
Take that one first, thank you.
Thank you.
No, not in response to my letter. I've talked to the Chief Executive of Hawke's Bay Regional Council. That letter was in response to, as I think you'll be aware, a letter that the Regional Council sent, advising that their council had made a decision on the 30th of January to not progress to the implementation phase. And the expectation through an MOU that had been set over many years was that the Regional Council would commence an amendment to their long-term plan and get out and consult the community. But made the request, would the Hastings District Council please consider continuing to provide $100,000 a year to do more reports and technical work? I've made the point that it's not my decision to make. I'm making a recommendation to the council, and the Regional Council are aware of this, is that I don't believe that we can afford to continue to fund $100,000 a year of more technical work when it's over a decade that the coastal hazard strategy work has been going. There has been a significant amount of money spent and a significant amount of time to support the Joint Committee make the recommendation that they did. And until the Regional Council are in a position to actually take that forward with the community, I'm recommending that we don't continue to invest that $100,000 a year. As my letter has said, I'm saying we will continue, once we're clear on what they think the work is, we're happy to consider continuing to provide some staff time towards this, but also making the point that in addition to the $100,000 a year for a decade that we've put in to get to the work of the Joint Committee, to make the recommendation, this council has invested millions of dollars in the coast in a way that's consistent with the coastal hazard strategy, around all the mitigation and adaptation work that's seen us build revetment walls at Clifton, at Cape View Corner. We have $750,000 provisioned in this year's budget to do the next Te Wonga revetment wall. So we are committed to our coast community in terms of investments that are consistent with the coastal hazard strategy, but just don't think it's warranted to keep spending $100,000 given a decades of work that's gone in to get to this point. And So that's been relayed and understood by the Chief Executive.
Thank you. Second
Thank
question,
you.
councillor.
My second question, through you, Your Worship. Everything that we do, we have very technical and we deep dive into the modelling from the officers and we understand what money we get, or what we get for our ratepayers' money. Are we going to get that if we agree to help HBT? Will we get that back? Will we get actual data, actual measurables, not just KPIs? Will we know that our ratepayers who are struggling, who are sacrificing, will actually get bang for their buck? Can we be assured of that when I'm looking at
Okay,
the list?
so just a question.
Yeah.
How are we going to make sure that we have good accountability? Thank you, Chief Executive. Councillors, can I just ask you to stick to the questions, please, and not share your views?
So, yes, through you, Your Worship, it again will be, as I've set out, the work subsequent to, should you make the decision to fund it, will get to all of the things that you do. Letters of expectation, appointments to governance, reporting back against the things that the funders are setting as the expectations and the measurable impact that you're wanting to see. Noting that I think we have quite a good base of evidence that we need to build on going forward, that this is not an insignificant part of Hawke's Bay's economy. It is right up there. It is $700 million a year and 5,100 jobs. That is an established baseline of evidence. Quite challenging to make absolute correlation, but in a, I suppose the last point I'd make, in a highly competitive industry, where 82% of the visitors to Hawke's Bay are domestic, that the role of marketing is actually quite critical in terms of the brand of Hawke's Bay and maintaining a market share. But the short answer is yes, you will do all of that through your funding agreements, your letter of expectations, the reporting back, the turning up to council meetings on a regular basis through performance and monitoring to show evidence of return for that investment.
Thank you, Your Worship. Third question, sorry. Have we done modelling to see if we can in 2025 have this as a capacity in the council with another FTE, bringing it into less than what we would be pushing out to tourism?
No, the fundamental premise, that people might have different views on, is that actually you have to have a coherent regional marketing strategy. People make choices to come to Hawke's Bay first, and so no, we haven't done a whole lot of work around trying to run a model where we did that as Hastings.
Thank you.
That is the previous model.
Yes.
Councils had FTEs. Did it work as a region that we worked collaboratively together to market our region? No, it didn't work. You had competition between TAs, local authorities, and it didn't work. And that's why the change of having an RTO, which was very common across New Zealand in 2011, was actually Hastings and Napier and Central and Wairoa at the time coming together to say, for our international guests, look at us in Hawke's Bay. This is what we've got on offer. For our local visitors that come from across the New Zealand, this is why you'd want to come to Hawke's Bay. Nobody was doing that work. People were marketing their own facilities. Hastings was marketing what they had to offer. Napier was marketing what they had to offer. So that is the model, previous model. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have questions, at least one, perhaps a couple of supplementary. I just want to follow up on Councillor Kerr and Councillor Monteperto Henry's questions. What management cost or input does the Regional Council currently, management and governance input, does the Regional Council put into the tourism, Hawke's Bay? Do we know?
Through Your Worship, I don't believe that actually they put any management effort into Hawke's Bay Tourism. It's very much an independent organisation of Hawke's Bay Regional Council. through the Constitution, Hawke's Bay Regional Council have the rights to appoint a director to the board at a governance level.
That was going to be my next question. If they have the right to appoint a director, will we have a right, because remembering which...
That's the work that's still to be done. That's what the Chief Executive said. How we get our accountability, our representation, that work is still to be done.
Well, the question I wanted to ask to supplement that is, will that involve us an extra cost?
No.
Okay,
No, I've asked those, thank you.
thank you. Councillor Apatu.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is, could the proposed arrangement with Hawke's Bay Tourism Limited boost or create new opportunity for Māori tourism within our region?
Through you, Your Worship, yes, possibly. But I think that this becomes, again, I'll probably be a bit of a stuck record, the opportunity once you've made a decision in terms of constitution, governance, appointments, letter of expectation. So if it was important to the funders that they wanted to explore that, that would be the expectation that you set for the entity.
Can I just add that the model is that we need the Māori tourism offering. So the RTO has the opportunity to market our region. They don't do the offering. They say, come to Hawke's Bay and experience this, this, this and this. This is why you should come. Our magnificent wineries, our beautiful, and our Māori tourism. And it's up to all of us to find opportunities for Māori tourism or any other tourism businesses, just like the cycleways so we all have a responsibility to encourage more Māori tourism, and Waiaraha is just sitting there waiting to be taken to the next level as Māori tourism, to tell our Hiritonga story actually. So we all have an opportunity to think about what Māori tourism could look like. Councillor Butto.
Thank you, Your Worship. The cycle network, I understand, is quite a draw card for tourists coming to the region. Do we know if our share of the cycle network coordinator would be picked up by regional council, or what the future of that would look like?
No, and I suppose what I'm signalling, I guess, which is what we're all doing, is having to stand back and say, if we have to pick up these costs and at no additional impact to our ratepayer, we have to stand back and say, what is the core priorities and role and responsibility for territorial authority? And so I suppose I've looked at it and said, look, on balance, if we think about the current context, there is no new investment coming from government as a co-funder for anything on cycleways for as long as we've got this government. I think the focus is all on roads. And so again, if you're having to make choices, and they're all difficult choices and trade-offs, it was my recommendation that would be one of the things that we pull back from, because it is in a space now where everything's about trade-offs.
Thank you. No further questions. Now we're moving to debate. Councillor Sholem.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have forwarded some proposed amendments through to the staff, which I'm hoping they might be able to bring up on screen. The amendments are really just firming up within the recommendations that Council is directing the Chief Executive to find operational savings for these 2 financial years. To do this, I just want that clarity in there. This is not going to have an additional rating impact on our community. It is through operational savings that we will be doing this. And just also asked for the removal of Hawke's Bay biodiversity, given the funding agreement that we currently have in place as an identified area of savings. So that is my proposed amendment. Would you like me to speak to that now, Your Worship, or come back?
I'm going to speak to that.
Through you, Madam Chair, you don't actually have a substantive motion on the table as yet, so...
I will amend that, thank you. I would like to move that then, with those amendments.
So to clarify, the member would like to put the motion on the table, which is the recommendations in the paper as they stand with the amendments that you've forwarded to staff.
Correct, thank you, Mr. Cameron.
Can we just have a minute to bring that together?
One we prepared earlier, well done. Gotta be efficient. That one. Don't need to find operation savings from the 25 and 13 to the funding for provision. So,
The challenge that we face, councillors, today is that, first of all, we don't know where the savings are coming from. Secondly, so we can craft all the recommendations that we wish, but there is a fundamental question here that you need to fully understand, and that is RTO for Hawke's Bay important for us as Heretaunga Hastings? So that is the fundamental question you need to ask yourselves. What does tourism mean for us? What does it mean for our ratepayers and all of our tourism operators? And that is the question that we need to be debating today. So, yes, we can redirect operational savings. We won't know what those are because we haven't tasked the officers to do that, and that's what Councillor Sholem is recommending here. But you know, we need to. That's what you have to consider in your deliberations today.
So, your question, those are the amendments to the substantive motion that you need a seconder.
So that's just the area D in red and the removal of biodiversity. Yes. Okay. Do I have a seconder for this amendment? Councillor Nixon, you're seconding? Okay, thank you. Right, well now we'll talk to the amendment, and invite you, Councillor Sholem, to speak to your amendment.
Thank you, Your Worship. These are incredibly tough economic times we're finding ourselves in, and we're hearing loud and clear from our community. They want us focused on core services, and they want us focused on financial prudence. Core services aren't just waste, water and roads. Core services are also about creating environments in which jobs can exist. That is a core service that council offers. We don't directly create jobs ourselves, but we do create those environments. And that's why when we look at councils across New Zealand, we see investment in economic development and tourism. It isn't about councils funding business, it's about ensuring that Hawke's Bay remains a place where people want to live, work and invest. And Hawke's Bay tourism plays a big role in that. We see in the report that tourism contributes over $700 million annually to our economy, and it supports over 5,000 jobs. And those jobs aren't just in tourism. They're in hospitality, they're in retail, and they're in the trades and services that support those businesses. In my view, when tourism grows, our whole economy grows. It is core service. Industry is stepping up. When we look at the report, we can see that Hawke's Bay Tourism has increased their levies to their membership. And we heard from the Chief that not everywhere in New Zealand do industry contribute in the same way. But we can't expect them to take responsibility for visitor attraction alone because it has broader benefits. Councils play a role in this throughout the country because it creates jobs, it creates local enjoyment and its economic resilience. Most importantly, this proposal is not, in the way we have currently framed it, going to cost the ratepayers a cent more in additional rates. This is about finding savings to make sure that we can provide this service, given HBRC have stepped out of this space. So in my view, the question is not whether or not we should invest in Hawke's Bay tourism. My view is, given that so many in our district are facing job losses right now, can we afford not to support something that is supporting our people so much?
Thank you. Other speakers to the motion that's above. Councillor Nixon, you want to speak? Wish to speak?
Yeah. I think just picking up Councillor Sholem's comments, we've really got to look at what I would call the multiplier effect. We put a certain amount of money in and we get hopefully a great deal more money back. The second point I'd like to make is it's important that we retain at least the basic structure of our tourism, because we lose it, it will take years to re-establish it. And it's taken us 15 years or more to get to where we are. So we can say, let's trim it back, and I can live with that. But that basic core in the middle, that's got to stay in some form or other.
Thank you, councillor Nixon. Now I'll take the speakers before us, speaking to the motion. Deputy Mayor Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Your Worship. Firstly, just probably more of a question. These savings that Councillor Sholem has challenged the Chief Executive to find, I just need to understand, is that in additional to the challenge we've put in front of you of $2 million a year?
$2.7 million a year, yes, which we're currently doing, and that's not going to go away. You know, the reality is we understand, and the message from this council has been very clear to me as your chief executive and to our staff. You know, we have a fiscal strategy. Some of that in the short term is the high rates because that's the recovery rate, and there's not a dollar more rating impact, and so the clarity is we're looking at ongoing savings, and we're clear that if you make the decision to fund Tourism Hawke's Bay, we're going to have to find that inside the organisation, but we will come back to you with the set of choices because all of this now is like what we've been doing over the last year. You've either got to have less staff, less activities, or reduced levels of service, and it will be a set of choices that will come back, and we will advise the council around what that looks like to find the level of savings required to fund tourism.
Thank you, Worship. I would like D tweaked slightly, because I would like the Chief Executive to report back to us on where they could be found. So the bottom line, where those savings have been achieved, I would like it to say where they could be achieved. The intent? Yeah, okay, so if everybody agrees, maybe the bottom line on D should say where these savings could be achieved, because it gives us the decision making. And now, Your Worship, I would like to speak to those, but just if that recommendation was changed.
Just ask the mover and seconder, are you comfortable with the change there that savings could be achieved instead of have been achieved? Yes, both of you. Thank you, Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. Sorry to be finicky at times.
Thank you.
I think I've been here too long, because I remember when Venture Hawke's Bay was the exciting new entity on the block and it failed. And then we moved into the time, as you mentioned, Your Worship, of 4 councils competing in this tourism space, competing at times in the same document for what you can do here versus what you can do there. It was really sensible when we were able to create this unity of the regional council funding on behalf of Hawke's Bay and providing governance there. So it was really sad when they made the decision to step away, and we now find ourselves in this space. I also remember the sad times of Hastings, when we didn't stand here proudly and promote, hey, I'm from Hastings, I'm from Hawke's Bay, but maybe weren't quite so keen to talk about where we were from. Before we were a really cool city to visit, before we had a very cool restaurant scene that we're really proud of, before the Hawke's Bay Marathon, before the Farmers Market, before Fork, before we had Ngā Pou, before we had Atawai Marama, Hākinakino, and the Walk with the Ancestors that are currently being promoted, before great golf courses, before Hoi, Horse of the Year, before the triathlon, before the arts tourism that's promoted, before our cycling trails of mountain biking, tourism, the trails themselves, highridge, before we became the great wine capital, and that's very new, before we had some really cool accommodation, before we had glamping. These are all promoted by Hawke's Bay Tourism. Bell Rock as a great day walk, and if you haven't done it, I recommend it. before the promotion of an area in my arohi of Tutera, before the promotion of mohaka rafting. Each of these by themselves would struggle to break into that national market, the domestic tourism. But collectively, that is Hastings, that is who we are. So I strongly endorse that we take these recommendations and that we support Hawke's Bay tourism. We've got to get behind them. What were the figures? $700 million and 5,000 jobs. We've got to support it. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I fully support the recommendations the way they're there, but I'd like to suggest a further amendment, if I may. I think that we really need to send a message to the Hawke's Bay Regional Council that the Hastings District Council expresses its real concern that the Hawke's Bay Regional Council no longer supports Hawke's Bay tourism and their activities that all benefit Hawke's Bay. That's sending them a message that we're not happy with what they've done.
So I think that could be an action. I think that my question is, do you need to have that as a
I'd
recommendation?
like to formalise it, Your Worship, so that it's there.
So we could agree to write on behalf of the council,
Yes.
expressing our disappointment that we find ourselves in this place undermining the Hawke's Bay tourism. You comfortable with this as an action?
Thank you, that'll do.
Okay. Thank you.
Agree.
Thank you, and everyone's supportive of that. Thank you. Councillor Teo Skipworth.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to support the recommendations. Given that I'm the previous owner of Iron Māori, who brings in 5,000 to 6,000 people into Hawke's Bay, not just Napier, I can endorse the support that Hawke's Bay Tourism gave to Iron Māori back then, but also to your question, Councillor Apatu, I think it's all our opportunity to help our Māori tourism ventures knock on Hawke's Bay Tourism door, and that door was never closed on Iron Māori, so I'm comfortable that we'll be able to support them through Hawke's Bay Tourism. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Teo Skipworth. Well said. Councillor Butto.
Thank you, Your Worship. Bit of a different view, but I don't support the recommendations as they stand. Fundamentally, I disagree with subsidising industry, and from general rates, we don't really have a good idea of what the outcomes are going to be from Hawke's Bay Tourism. We have a very good understanding of the outputs. We know that there's going to be marketing, we know there's going to be promotion, but we don't know what the outcome of that will be. I probably could have been convinced if this was something that was done as a targeted rate on tourism businesses, but it is coming out of the general rate. My concern is that how am I to justify this to my rural communities who are still isolated? How can I speak to my school teacher who's cycling 14 kilometres across country because her gorge is buggered to go to school and then spend her general rates on tourism? At the end of
So I just point one thing out. You're absolutely right how you're representing your ward, Councillor Butto, but I'll remind you, you are elected as a district councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship, and it is something that applies across the district to general ratepayers more generally who are funding industry through this. And at the end of the day, to me, there are only two things that we can say for certain about not funding Hawke's Bay tourism. One of them is that tourists will still come to Hawke's Bay, and the other is that the ratepayer can save $500,000. I commend the work commend the work the staff will do to find savings, but to me, I feel it should be savings to the ratepayer and not supporting an industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butto. I'll just also point out that the urban ratepayers are paying for the whole district's recovery from Cyclone Gabrielle, as well as the rural ratepayers. So just need a point of clarification. We need to get the right message across to our people. Everybody's in this together. Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, and probably to change tack a little bit after what Councillor Butto has just said, and to counter it, I think there is actually evidence, $774 million, over 500 jobs, and I would argue probably a couple of $1 billion in tourism assets.
5,000 jobs.
5,000 jobs and billions in assets.
Yeah.
Only yesterday morning, weirdly, I was asked to be a tour guide for a guest at Cape Kidnappers Lodge who wanted to go for a mountain bike ride. Picked him up at 6 o'clock yesterday morning and took him up our fantastic Tamata Peak and showcased our amazing district. And one of the questions I asked, as he was behind me, I was in front of him, was, how did you know about Hawke's Bay? And he knew about Hawke's Bay, an American, because of literature and stuff that him and his family had actually read about Hawke's Bay. And the counter issue is here that the marketing at the moment has caught and brought people to Hawke's Bay. If that marketing actually stops, people will quite quickly actually forget about Hawke's Bay. So I think it is incredibly important. My greatest concern is that it is actually a shoestring budget, and it actually needs a greater contribution. And I would like to see that actually this is a baseline, but we actually need to work with Hawke's Bay Tourism to actually build that revenue or build the money that they can actually invest greater. $992,000 is being stripped out of the budget for consumer marketing. And I've just given you the example of where that actually has been effective. So that is something we actually do need to work with them a lot more closer on. So I'm in full support of actually continuing on and of those recommendations. Thank you.
If I could just through you, Your Worship, comment, because I think you raise an excellent point, Councillor Harvey, is this is very much a survive heading into either there being new funding levers or through the LTP. When Her Worship referenced the meeting with all of the big industry players, you know, we're food and wine country. We you know, the point was that this can't be our aspiration to limp along with minimum viable product.
Yeah.
To your point, you know, there are a whole lot of things we're not going to see, and we're not in any way thinking about the potential for the medium to long term. But we recognise that right now is not the right time to be trying to work out how do we fund you know, something that would simply be unaffordable for the councils. But that is the important work that needs to happen over the coming 12 to 18 months in order to, because I just guess to score the point that you're raising, the reality is there are a whole lot of things that add value to our community. It won't be happening for the next 2 years. We won't be doing all of the industry and trade stuff that brings the conferences to Toi Toi or, you know, the Napier War Memorial Centre. This is very much a absolute minimum model to, as Councillor Nixon raised, I mean, maintain a base until we can do that work that's got to be an aspiration that's more than what's currently on the table.
So once again, both for our facilities and marketing our facilities, we're going to have to pay for people to go to those places, as will Napier, to market. So we either collect the rate this way and we pay for people to represent the region, or we go separately as Hastings and Napier to market our own facilities. This is the risk that we face. And we won't have Toi Toi with many, many conferences every year because we've got nobody at the conference, at events, conferencing to market Hastings. Councillor Fowler.
Yep, thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I agree with the recommendations, and I think picking up on what the Mayor said, yes, D's good, but I think we should be funding it regardless. I think it's too important not to. From my historical studies, looking back, as I do occasionally, the old days of us going our own way with tourism didn't work, it was fragmented. It actually cost the organisation, Hastings District Council and Napier, a lot of money. It brought into kind of head-butting between them. I disagree with Councillor Butto. I think we're all in this together, and we just don't want to start opening up urban, rural divides. I also personally think we are very fortunate to have a man in Hamish Saxton, who's been brilliant. I've had the pleasure to work with him on the Art Deco board. He was a great support to me, and he was absolutely brilliant. And agree with Councillor Harvey too. I think it's an absolute baseline. I think we'll have more of an input being actually on the board now, so that's an unintended consequence, which I think will be to our advantage as well.
Thank you, councillor Fowler. Councillor Curley.
Your Worship, I just would like to acknowledge an error I made in the pronunciation. It is Hakikino Pa, and I fully apologise to family.
Yeah, Hakaku, yeah.
Yeah, I just know I made a mistake,
thank
so
you.
I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you. Councillor Watkins?
Thank you, Your Worship. Both parties in this are looking at financial discipline. I support the $462,500, but I don't support opening the door to say, look, you can come back during the year for a little bit more here and a little bit more here, as suggested in 4.8. To me, that's out. This is the figure, 462.50.
I think that 4.8, I'm just checking. Yeah. That's a conversation that we all need to have, councillor. So, you know, once again, if we have these facilities and nobody's marketing them, nobody will come. So that is a conversation that's got to be given in the context of the recommendations. Councillor Hickey?
Kia ora, Your Worship, and councillors. Look, I'm definitely in favour of supporting this. My previous experience with Māori tourism and supporting business growth, we all know that SMEs actually drive the economy, and that's what we actually need at the moment. Not only the tourism operators, but those who support tourism operators, suppliers, and the workforce that will go along with it. So, you know, there's already a lot's been said, and I just want to make a narrative that there's an opportunity for collaboration with the MRTO and the RTO, the Māori tourism operators. We've talked about Kotahitanga. It's been driven through our King Tuheitia and will be driven through Māoridom. Is that how can we come together to drive some great opportunities? And Hawke's Bay is a destination. Hawke's Bay is still a location. And as has been mentioned, previous speakers, the likes of Waitangi Days and Matariki and Toitu, Te Reo festivals and conferences are a thing that we could look to strive for in 25, in the words of Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hickey. Yes, we are striving in 25. Councillor Nixon, you have spoken. Have you got something else to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on a couple of the previous speakers if I could. The first one was Councillor Fowler. I was on the board of Wine Country Tourism back 15 plus years ago, and going separately was just a total disaster. I mean, we spent more effort fighting each other than actually doing any of the work. The second thing is, I just want to pick up on Councillor Butter's comments. I think we need to remember, from a ratepayer's point of view, this is actually not an increase. It's an increase to our ratepayers directly, but that money was being raised by the regional council.
Operational savings.
Just let me finish.
So just to clarify,
So
what we're asking the Chief Executive to do?
To clarify, the regional council is reducing the burden on the Hastings householders by not collecting that rate anymore. It's being shifted to Hastings District Council. We're not imposing additional rates on our council because we will find those savings within the existing budgets.
I think I've got to interrupt because that's exactly the point I was trying to make. From a ratepayer's point of view, it's actually slightly less than they are currently paying. That's all I want to say.
Yes, that's right, because then it won't be paying to regional council. Unless regional council rate for something else. Okay, so we don't know that yet. They've chosen not to collect a rate for economic development or tourism. No further speakers. I'd just like to say a few words myself as a councillor in 2011 who worked very hard to unite our region to have a regional RTO. And I have seen the fundamental difference between two models. There's no question, as many speakers have said today, that the last model worked. And I'd just like to first of all acknowledge the board and the staff of Hawke's Bay Tourism and what they've been through with the uncertainty, not only over the last 2 months, but over the last year. And I know that they have lost good resource and capability because people don't have that certainty of a job. This is a really important industry. We have a magnificent region. Does everybody know about it? I saw firsthand over the Christmas holidays some American guests. They had no idea what we had on offer in Hawke's Bay. They came here for a wedding, and when they came here, they saw the amazing outdoor activities, they saw the beautiful hikes, they called them, and the walks. And they saw, but they would never have come here unless they knew. And unfortunately, we're out on the coast, we're on the east. We're not on the main trunk line for our international guests. They come Auckland, Rotorua, Taupō, Nelson, Christchurch, Queenstown. They don't know about Hawke's Bay unless we tell them. Someone needs to tell them our story. We have an amazing story. We are a great wine capital of the world, representing New Zealand as the best wine in New Zealand. We have so many incredible offerings with beaches, and as the Deputy Mayor has spoken, so many amazing tourism offerings. And when I sat in that meeting a few days before Christmas with all the tourism operators and heard that nobody was going to be marketing their opportunity to capture the tourists and bring them into their businesses, I saw that those businesses had been through 3 years of turmoil trying to keep their business going through COVID and then the cyclone. And I heard from them how difficult, but they'd kept going under this time of uncertainty, under this time of recovery. They'd kept their business afloat to make sure that they were keeping people employed and bringing that industry tourism dollar into Hawke's Bay. So I am very, very supportive of the recommendations. I am really supportive of the incredible work, the mahi that both the board and the staff do to promote our incredible, magnificent region. We have everything here. We have everything on offer, but unless we tell our story, we're not going to be able to have this industry in our region. And I'm really nervous, just as Councillor Harvey has pointed out, about the minimum offering. And we have to work harder to look at other external funding sources. But this is the start, and today is the start with those recommendations. And our colleagues, your colleagues, both in Napier and Central Hawke's Bay, will also be considering this over the net today and over the next week. So that we are a region that is united. It is collecting the levy from a different way, but we will still support a tourism industry. Kia ora. Right, no further speakers. Any right of reply, Councillor Sholem?
Incredibly well summarised, Your Worship. And just my closing comment would be, this is not a subsidy of business. This is an investment in our whole community. And I wholeheartedly support the work of Hawke's Bay Tourism and the moves to look to the future.
Thank you. I'll put those recommendations. Do we need to see them one last time? Everyone quite clear? Okay, thank you. I'll put the recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Councillor Butto, you want to record your vote? Thank you. That is carried just about unanimously. All right. Thank you very much. Now, we only have one item in our extraordinary meeting today, in our council agenda, before we go into public excluded. And before we do that, could I ask Mr Cameron if he could explain to us why we would need to take this item into a public excluded?
That's true, Madam Chair. There's two agenda items recommended for public exclusion. Both items cover situations where council is in commercial negotiations with external parties. That covers the business information both of council and of external parties, commercially sensitive information. Therefore, the Chief Executive recommends at this time it's appropriate to consider these matters in public exclusion.
Thank you. So we have a recommendation here to exclude the public for items 9 and 10. And for those reasons that have just been outlined by Mr Cameron, happy to move from the chair, seconded Councillor Kerr. Any further comment? I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you, that's carried. We do have Do we take that separately, that we include, we do have a separate recommendation, a motion that Sam Saunders be permitted to present via Zoom after the public has been excluded of his knowledge of matters pertaining to item 9, and that would assist the council in decision-making. Do I have a mover, please, for that motion? Thank you, councillor Watkins. Second, councillor Butto. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Thank you. That's carried. And that concludes today's extraordinary council meeting. And as we say, we are striving in 25, and this is our first meeting of the year, and we're very excited to be rocking and rolling for our community and making all sorts of good things happen. And can I also, as mentioned earlier, before we close with a karakia, thinking about all of our community, second anniversary tomorrow, those who are still impacted, those who have lost loved ones, and those who are still in a place of uncertainty and unknowingness where their futures may lie, whether that's their business, their home, their family, and their lifestyle. So our hearts go out to our community. We can be incredibly proud of how our volunteers have helped. We can be incredibly proud of how our contractors and our staff have helped us make sure that we rebuild our transport network, our roads, our bridges, our slips, and make sure that we continue to do this and stay very focused on our recovery and rebuild over the next 7 years. And thank you for our community for joining us today. Kia ora.
Kia ora no tātou, kua michi tā tātou nei wā, nā reira, councillors, we have our karakia, if you've got it on hand, our karakia kia tau, so we'll start there. E noi tātou, kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ato whānau tō tātou areki a ihu karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga taitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, mena kia ora tātou,